Imagine, like you're driving down this long stretch of highway, right? The speedometer reads a comfortable 65, the gas gauge says you have a full tank, and the engine sounds like it's humming along perfectly.
Yeah, you're just cruising.
Exactly. You're cruising feeling totally confident. But beneath all that confidence, there is this hidden, just catastrophic problem. Your dashboard is fundamentally broken.
Oh, wow.
You're actually doing 90, your tank is completely dry, and the engine is like seconds away from seizing up. You are making these high-speed, critical decisions based on profoundly flawed data.
And, I mean, that is one of the most dangerous positions you can be in, right? Competence without accuracy. You have literally no way of knowing you're in trouble until the whole system just totally fails.
Right. And today, for you, the listener, we are looking at your internal dashboard. We are on a mission to unpack the hidden behavioral and psychological forces that are dictating our health, our wealth, and our social lives here in 2025.
It's a huge topic.
It is. And we've gathered this really fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive. We're looking at a new 2024 through May 2025 Federal Reserve Economic Report, some Pew research on the modern loneliness epidemic, clinical data regarding insulin resistance, men's health statistics, and behavioral psychology studies spanning from delayed gratification to the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, and when you lay all these seemingly disparate sources side by side, this really cohesive picture emerges. It shows how human beings just consistently misjudge their environment and their own capabilities, often to their own detriment.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the real-world outcomes we see in our bank accounts and our bodies, we first have to understand the blind spots of the mind. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is just the perfect starting point.
Right.
The popular understanding is basically just that, incompetent people are overly confident. But looking at the scientific community right now, there's this massive debate about the actual underlying mechanics of why that happens.
Yeah, the field is currently split between two major interpretations. So the original concept, the one proposed by Dunning and Kruger, is rooted in what they call the dual burden, or metacognitive theory.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the premise is that low performers suffer from this compounding problem. First, they lack the actual skill required to perform a task well, right?
Yeah.
But second, because they lack that skill, they fundamentally lack the metacognitive ability to recognize what good performance even looks like. I mean, they literally cannot perceive their own incompetence because the very tools they need to assess competence are missing.
That's wild. But I was reading through the counter-argument in the sources, right, the statistical explanation, and it approaches this from an entirely different angle.
It really does.
It suggests this isn't some deep psychological failing, but more of like a mathematical artifact rooted in a concept called regression to the mean. So if you take a group of people who perform terribly on a test, say they land in the 12th percentile, and ask them to guess their score, statistically, their guesses will naturally just regress upward toward the middle.
Right. And when you combine that mathematical tendency with the general human bias where almost everyone just assumes they're slightly better than average, it creates this illusion of massive delusional overconfidence in low performers.
Yeah, but I mean, wait. Is it just math? I have a hard time buying that. I mean, think about it like asking a genuinely terrible driver to rate their own driving.
Okay, yeah.
If a driver doesn't even know that checking the blind spot is like a requirement for changing lanes safely, they aren't going to dock themselves points for failing to do it, right? They'll score themselves perfectly because their rubric for perfect is entirely broken. They literally don't know what good driving looks like to compare themselves to.
And see, that driving analogy illustrates the dual burden concept perfectly. And the real-world implications of this metacognitive blind spot are severe. I mean, we observe this in high-stakes environments like aviation, where pilots attempt maneuvers way beyond their training.
Right.
Or even in medicine, where trainees might, severely misjudge their capability to perform a really complex procedure.
It's terrifying. But we spend so much time analyzing how low ability creates dangerous overconfidence. We kind of have to look at the other end of the spectrum to get the full picture, right? Like, what happens to our internal dashboard when someone possesses actual, measurable, high cognitive ability?
Well, we have this 2025 MDPI ex post facto study that addresses this exact question. The researchers designed this tightly controlled comparison. They took 268 high-ability university students, and they compared their Big Five personality traits against a matched group of 268 average ability students.
Okay, because the cultural stereotype usually paints highly intelligent people as, like, highly open to new experiences, perhaps a bit eccentric, maybe hyper-focused.
Right, but the data tells a surprisingly narrow story. Out of all the personality traits they measured, the researchers found only one statistically significant difference between the high ability group and the average ability group.
Only one.
Just one. The high ability students scored noticeably lower in the trait of responsibility.
Wait, really? That feels entirely counterintuitive at first glance, like the smartest individuals in the academic environment being the least responsible.
What's fascinating here is how this isolated trait compares to the broader demographic data within that exact same study. Because when the researchers looked at the general sample to analyze gender differences, they found women broadly scored higher in responsibility, extroversion, and agreeableness, while scoring lower in emotional stability.
Okay, so broad, multi-trait variations.
Exactly. But when isolating the intelligence factor alone, that single drop in responsibility is the primary defining characteristic of the high ability group.
So what does this all mean mechanically? I mean, why would highly intelligent students be less responsible?
It makes me wonder if we are looking at an environmental adaptation.
How so?
Well, if a highly intelligent student is never genuinely challenged by their academic environment, they never have to develop the organizational habits, the discipline, or the sense of duty that average students are forced to build just to survive the curriculum. Like, they check out because they can afford to check out.
And the researchers point directly to that lack of environmental demand. I mean, responsibility in a psychological context, it involves fulfilling obligations, managing time, doing the really tedious work required to maintain order. If you can just ace a test without studying, you never build those behavioral muscles required for tedious work, which fundamentally compromises how these individuals function when the environment eventually does demand effort. Because if you spend your formative years just skating by, you never learn how to endure discomfort for a long-term goal. And that maps perfectly onto one of the most critical psychological functions we rely on as adults, which is delayed gratification.
Oh, absolutely. It is the ultimate test of our behavioral muscles. If an individual struggles with responsibility and accurately assessing their own habits, planning for a distant future becomes nearly impossible.
Right. And we're all familiar with the classic Stanford marshmallow test from the late 60s, right? Putting a marshmallow in front of a child, telling them they get a second one if they can just wait 15 minutes. But the interesting part isn't really the test itself. It's the underlying biological conflict it reveals.
Yeah, the test visualizes what psychologists call dual system theory. So in any scenario requiring patience, there is a literal tug of war happening in your brain.
Synta.
It really is. The limbic system, which governs our immediate emotional responses and desires, it registers the sugar and just demands immediate consumption. But simultaneously, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive function and long-term reasoning, is trying to override the limbic system to secure the larger future reward.
It's like willpower is a muscle, but relying on sheer willpower is a losing game. The environment is the gym. I mean, if you leave the marshmallow sitting right in front of you, the limbic system will eventually win.
That's completely validated by the behavioral economists. They explain this failure through a concept known as delay discounting or hyperbolic discounting. The human brain just really struggles to value abstract futures. The further away a reward or a consequence is in time, the less tangible it feels.
Right.
I mean, a second marshmallow 15 minutes from now is just a concept. The marshmallow sitting right there on the table is a physical reality.
Which is where cooling strategies become so essential. We don't have to rely on raw willpower if we change how our brain perceives the temptation. The sources outline these cooling strategies, like if-then planning.
Oh, those are great.
Yeah, you pre-program a response.
Yeah.
Like if I feel the urge to eat the marshmallow, then I will close my eyes and count to 10. Or using visualization to make the future self feel more real, or actively deploying positive distraction.
Right, and psychologists refer to the result of these strategies as building ego resilience and ego control. It's this architectural framework that allows a person to navigate immense desires without their discipline breaking.
But looking at the broader adult population, we are failing the marshmallow test on just a staggering scale. The Federal Reserve's Economic Well-Being Report, this is covering data from 2024 through May 2025. It provides a really harsh look at our financial reality. I mean, our financial marshmallows, basically.
It's pretty bleak.
When asked how they would handle an unexpected $400 emergency expense, only 63% of adults stated they could cover it exclusively with cash or its equivalent. like a credit card paid off at the end of the month.
Think about that. That means 37% of the adult population cannot absorb a highly common minor financial shock without resorting to carrying debt, borrowing from friends, or like selling possessions.
And the vulnerability just grows when you scale up the emergency. When looking at a slightly larger shock, such as a sudden job loss, only 55% of adults have a 3-month rainy day fund to fall back on. We are consuming the marshmallow immediately, leaving literally no buffer for the inevitable disruptions of life.
And this hyperbolic discounting reaches its absolute most dangerous extreme when applied to the ultimate exercise in delayed gratification, which is retirement saving.
Oh, for sure, because the reward is like decades away. The brain can barely compute a benefit that won't materialize for 30 years.
Exactly. And the Federal Reserve data reflects the struggle so vividly. Only 35% of non-retirees feel their retirement savings plan is currently on track, which is a number that has actually declined since 2021.
Wow.
But the more alarming statistic is behavioral. In the past year, 14% of non-retirees actually borrowed money from, cashed out, or reduced their contributions to their existing retirement accounts.
They're literally raiding their own future to subsidize the present.
Right. And the cited reasons are primarily unexpected medical expenses or recent layoffs. When the safety net is thin, the distant future is the very first thing sacrificed to survive the immediate present.
And this inability to delay gratification doesn't just empty our bank accounts. It's taking a profound, measurable toll on our physical biology. We're seeing a massive crisis in metabolic health because we apply the exact same hyperbolic discounting to our diets.
We really do. The clinical data from MD Anderson regarding insulin resistance draws a direct line between the instant gratification of modern, highly processed foods and the collapse of our metabolic systems.
And the analogy the MD Anderson source uses to explain insulin resistance is brilliant for understanding the mechanics here. Think of insulin as a fleet of cargo trucks and glucose, the sugar from your food, as the cargo.
Right.
The truck's sole purpose is to deliver the cargo into your body's cells to be used for energy. But when you develop insulin resistance, the truck gets a flat tire. It arrives at the cell, but it just cannot make the delivery.
The system breaks down, but your pancreas, which is the organ managing this fleet, it doesn't possess a mechanism to fix the tires. Its only biological response to undelivered cargo is to manufacture and deploy more trucks.
So the pancreas pumps out more flat tire trucks, and simultaneously your liver detects all these empty trucks and assumes the body is starving, so it starts manufacturing even more glucose cargo. It's a vicious cycle leading straight to fat storage, chronic inflammation, and eventually full-blown metabolic syndrome.
It is a physiological panic response to a modern environment overflowing with immediate, concentrated energy sources that human evolution never anticipated, Reversing this requires adopting long-term cooling strategies for our biology.
And what do those look like?
Well, the evidence-based fixes from the sources are heavily reliant on delayed gratification. Simply losing 10% of body weight significantly decreases the risk profile. Transitioning away from processed foods toward a whole foods diet like the Mediterranean or DASH diets, that rebuilds the metabolic foundation.
But those diets require planning, grocery shopping, cooking. They require ego control as opposed to the effortless immediacy of a drive-through.
Absolutely. And then we have to factor in exercise. Committing to 150 minutes of exercise a week is a really critical intervention because of this fascinating biological workaround. During active exercise, your muscle cells are capable of absorbing glucose from your bloodstream, completely independent of insulin.
Oh, wow. So you bypass the flat tire trucks entirely.
Exactly. The muscles just pull the cargo in themselves. And we now have sophisticated ways to monitor how well these lifestyle choices are working. The American Physiological Society put out this brief noting the increasing use of heart rate variability, specifically tracking the coefficient of variation while a person sleeps.
Okay, so a digital biomarker.
Right. It acts as a digital biomarker, allowing doctors to continuously track these physiological behaviors and recovery across different ages and sexes, which provides tangible, delayed gratification feedback.
Which is huge. Because when we look at the breakdown by sex, the shortlisted 2025 statistics show that these biological risks are disproportionately affecting men, and the root cause points heavily toward behavioral choices. The stats paint a grim picture. 34.1% of men are currently overweight, 50.5% suffer from hypertension, and cardiovascular disease remains the leading cause of death for men in the U.S.
Yeah, these conditions do not develop overnight. They're the compounded result of lifestyle behaviors and ignored warning signs stretching over decades.
Here's where it gets really interesting regarding human behavior, though. The data reveals that 55% of men simply do not get regular health screenings. We've been talking about hyperbolic discounting as choosing a reward today at the expense of tomorrow. But isn't avoiding the doctor the ultimate tragic form of hyperbolic discounting?
Oh, that's a really good point.
Like choosing to avoid the minor discomfort and potential bad news of a checkup today, fully accepting the cost of a massive, unmanageable health crisis 10 years down the line.
It operates on the exact same psychological mechanism. Yeah, it is delaying reality. And the consequences of this avoidance ripple through every aspect of health. I mean, we see a significant impact on men's sexual health as well. Current data shows that male reproductive issues now account for over 1/3 of all infertility cases.
Wow, that is a substantial portion of a deeply complex medical issue.
And while around half of those specific cases remain of unknown origin, medical professionals frequently link them back to these exact lifestyle factors, or to undiagnosed, unmanaged conditions like hypertension and diabetes that were just never caught because the preventative screenings were skipped.
We are looking at a systemic failure to protect our future selves. Whether an individual is navigating a sudden financial shock, a looming health crisis, or simply trying to manage daily impulses, the ultimate human safety net has always been community. But the sources show a hidden crisis dismantling our social connections.
Yes, the 2025 Pew Research Center study on the loneliness epidemic provides crucial context for how isolated we are becoming. Currently, 16% of all adults report feeling lonely all or most of the time.
Which fundamentally challenges the common narrative. We usually picture the elderly as the most isolated demographic in our society.
The data completely flips that assumption. Adults under the age of 50 are significantly more likely to experience chronic loneliness than those over 50. The rate is 22% for the younger demographic, compared to just 9% for the older group.
22% of people under 50 feeling lonely most of the time is a societal alarm bell. And while men and women report experiencing this loneliness at roughly equal rates, their behavioral responses, the safety nets they actively build, are entirely different. Women demonstrate a much more proactive approach to coping.
The gender gap in seeking emotional support is vast. When navigating difficult times, 54% of women will reach out to their mother for support, compared to only 42% of men. We see the exact same 54% of women reaching out to a friend, whereas only 38% of men will do the same.
That's a big drop.
It is, and this disparity extends to professional help as well. 22% of women will engage a mental health professional, compared to just 16% of men.
So the reluctance to seek medical screenings translates directly into a reluctance to seek emotional or psychological help.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the tragic endpoint of this isolation is reflected right in the shortlister mental health statistics. In 2022, the suicide rate for men was 3.85 times higher than the rate for women. Men accounted for over 68% of all suicide deaths.
Heartbreaking.
Furthermore, among adults living with serious mental illnesses, a significantly lower percentage of men actually received the necessary treatment.
Thinking back to the Dunning-Kruger effect from the beginning of our deep dive, I wonder if we are observing a social version of the dual burden for men here. Like, are they lacking the actual emotional support network to help them navigate crises? A&D lacking the metacognitive awareness required to actively build and maintain one in the first place?
That is a highly relevant comparison. Building an emotional infrastructure requires practice, skill, and vulnerability. If a person is never taught how to cultivate those connections, they may not recognize the absence of the network until a crisis hits and the safety net simply isn't there. And we cannot ignore the societal friction that complicates this. Society views social gathering differently based on gender, too.
Oh, right. The Pew data touched on this perception gap.
It did. 66% of Americans say that all female social groups have a positive impact on women's overall well-being. However, only 56% of Americans say the same thing about all male groups having a positive impact on men.
Wow, so there is a measurable skepticism toward men gathering socially, which undoubtedly adds a layer of friction for men trying to forge those vital life-saving connections, It's really remarkable how tightly woven all of these sources are when you pull back and look at the larger picture.
The through line is undeniable. I mean, the psychological mechanisms driving one area of our lives invariably leak into the others.
Escaping the trap of our own cognitive blind spots, like the Dunning-Kruger effect, dictates whether we can accurately assess and master our environment. And mastering our environment allows us to deploy cooling strategies and delayed gratification.
Exactly.
That delayed gratification is the exact mechanism that protects our savings accounts in the Federal Reserve data and protects our cells from insulin resistance in the clinical data. And ultimately, having the self-awareness and vulnerability to reach out and build a social safety net is the only sustainable way to combat the crushing loneliness quantified in the Pew Research. It all connects to build a healthy, resilient life.
Resilience is not accidental. It requires consistently overriding our most immediate, comfortable impulses to secure our long-term survival.
Which leaves you, the listener, with one final, provocative thought to mull over as we wrap up. If our ability to delay gratification dictates our financial and physical health, and our willingness to ask for help dictates our mental health, how will the increasing automation, artificial intelligence, and hyper-instant gratification of our digital world fundamentally rewire these crucial human survival traits over the next 10 years?
That's the big question.
Are we evolving into an environment that actively engineers our patience away, or will we adapt entirely new, unforeseen ways to build resilience?
As the environment changes, our cooling strategies will just have to evolve right alongside it.
The internal dashboard is feeding you the data. It is up to you to interpret the signals before the engine seizes. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking the hard questions, keep seeking out multiple perspectives, and we will see you next time.